section will discuss why safeguarding is fundamental to the Going Beyond project. So, lack of safety, both in person and online, is a fundamental barrier to young women's meaningful inclusion in Going Beyond and their inclusion in the broader ecosystem for entrepreneurship and community leadership. We've heard this throughout various co-designs with young people. We hear this when we talk to young women in our programs, that their feelings of safety and safety risks can be a really critical factor in their engagement in programming and also their ability to apply what they're gaining from the program. On the right here, we can see a depiction of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a classic psychological framework that was created to try to understand the layers that are necessary in order to reach a state in which all of our needs are met and we are ready to pursue self-actualization, which means to become the most complete and authentic version of who we are, a version of ourselves. So you can see in this depiction that physiological needs, so this is, we don't want to be hungry, thirsty, exhausted, freezing, overheated, sick, or in pain. These are the basic needs of our day-to-day. And right above that is safety. So we want to feel safe. We want to feel confident we can avoid pain, that we can avoid other dangers, in order to then progress to tackle other things like creating strong relationships and bonds and networks and growing our sense of self-esteem and confidence. But we can't do those things unless we feel safe fundamentally. So for Going Beyond, that means that safety is a critical underpinning condition for our youth participants to be able to meaningfully benefit from Going Beyond. So that's where safeguarding comes in. Safeguarding refers to the measures and practices that we put in place to protect health, well-being, and human rights of individuals to ensure that they are free from harm. So to put this in a slightly different way, this is describing safeguarding as the organizational responsibility to ensure that staff, programs, and activities do no harm. So that includes specifically sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. So we need to ensure that we prevent that from occurring and to respond appropriately when harm does occur. This is based on an internationally recognized set of minimum standards for all organizations that work directly with people, and especially underserved and vulnerable groups. And that includes women, youth, refugee and displaced communities, and people with disabilities. The Interagency Standing Committee Minimum Operating Standards for Protection from Sexual Exploitation and Abuse is the most widely used standard on PSEA internationally. So that is our go-to core guiding document that our policy has been based on. So we've already mentioned that safeguarding is this responsibility to ensure that our staff, programs, and activities do no harm. So this slide outlines the background of safeguarding. And so this safeguarding involves putting measures in place to prevent any harm from happening. And it also includes responding to anything that does happen as well. So this diagram can depict the realities of safeguarding. The circle on the left is, in the light blue, is the community that we're working in. And the reality is that we know there is harm that happens, and we'll talk about power dynamics, but this is due to differences in power dynamics and abuses of power. So there can be physical harm, or emotional harm, or sexual harm happening. Then the circle on the right in the green represents our organization, our project going beyond, and our organization's work through that project. So we need to ensure that we are preventing any harm from happening when our organization comes into a community and implements our programming. We also need to ensure that we prevent any harm from happening within our organization, between team members, and that includes things like bullying, sexual harassment, and sexual exploitation. So we do this through policies and procedures that will create safe environments and that will guide behavior and standards within our project and within our organization. And we also put in place response mechanisms, so reporting systems, referral systems, to be able to act on any issues that might arise. So really at the heart of safeguarding is that safeguarding addresses the misuse of power. So certain people sometimes have more power based on their role in an organization or an institution, on their gender, on their ethnicity, maybe their disability, nationality, employment status, or education, and we could name others as well. And the misuse of this power can often lead to things like discrimination, exploitation, and abuse. Importantly, overlapping vulnerabilities can lead to increased risks of exploitation of different groups of youth. And this shapes the kinds of barriers they face, their sense of safety, and how positive their experience of our program is. So, for example, we know that young women may face certain vulnerabilities and safety risks, especially related to gender-based violence, and that this can also be exacerbated for young women with disabilities who may be at greater risk of exploitation as a result of those overlapping vulnerabilities. Sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment involves people within organizations using their power in harmful ways against people who are less powerful. A really important fact is that sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment does disproportionately impact women and girls. The rates of gender-based violence are very high, but it can also affect men and boys. So we need to make sure that we are being inclusive when we speak about safety, and we are creating spaces for men and boys to report harm, because we know that because of gender norms, it can be very difficult for them to do so and very, very underreported.